So that was a very interesting segment of The Word on the Street. I'm sure that many of you can relate to some of those viewpoints. Now, let's get right into the discussion. So one of the first questions that we have in this topic is, what is urban life? You know, I myself am not familiar with this subject, so Pir Saab, could you please help define what urban life is?
Well, before we start to talk about what is urban life, I think we actually need to define the word urban. Urban means a densely populated area, normally a city. For example, our nation capital, Washington, D.C., is an urban area. New York City is also an urban area. Chicago is an urban area. But normally, for the most part, and lately, the word urban has taken on different connotations. The media has now begun to use urban to mean various ethnic groups, poverty, high crime areas, where there are very small or lacking various amenities for social life in itself. So that is sort of a subcomponent of urban life. It used to be called the inner city or ghetto, all right? So that would sort of be an introduction or a definition on what urban life is.
And urban life has actually evolved throughout time in the past 2 or 3 decades as well. And I know Haroon Saab, you actually live in Chicago in the inner city. Could you please give us your perspective on what is the urban life?
Oh yeah, well, urban life in America, I would say, is very diverse, fast-paced, consists of poor people who struggle for survival, the working class who work for the American dream, I would say, and the wealthy people who work hard to try to stay wealthy, and that's how I would describe the urban life in America.
That's a lot of different aspects as well, because you have a couple of decades ago where these inner cities were highly populated and a lot of money was going through, and now you have these inner cities where they're lacking some funding, and like you said, the American dream is now not as easily attainable as it was before. Let me switch to Emanuddin Bhai. You're from Philadelphia. What is your definition of the urban life?
Well, in my perspective, the urban life, I would see it as sort of the center culturally and as far as commerce for a society. And I think that over the years, the lines of urban, suburban have become a little bit blurred, because with the advances in technology, more information is easily spread across those lines. And more people come into the cities to do their work and to go to school, although they may live outside of the cities. So the influences are there on both sides because so many people are just going back and forth. So I think it's not as clearly defined as it once was.
So that's very interesting points. You mentioned 2 different things, social and I think educational as well, coming from your background in education. Let's go back a little bit and let's talk about some of the social issues, some of these struggles that I've been hearing about, so on and so forth. Let's get some various aspects of this. Pierre, could you please talk about that?
If we're talking mainly about the inner city areas within the urban community, one of the challenges that families and individuals who live in these inner cities is the lack of adequate education, all right? The lack of jobs, the lack of decent housing, right? So individuals who live in these areas, again, have the same desires and goals and needs like other individuals have, but again, these resources are either lacking or provided on a very inadequate basis. To give you an example, when we talk about education, for example, some of the latest statistics are saying that about 50% of the individuals who enter high school only complete high school. So that's a very high dropout rate compared to, for example, the suburban areas where they're probably close to 80 to 90% who are actually going on to higher education, where individuals in the inner city, again, are dropping out for various reasons. And of course, with the high dropout rate, that sort of perpetuates not being able to find an adequate job to support themselves.
And the educational quality itself is not at the highest level anymore. I mean, considering you have this statistic, I would say that maybe the educational quality has dropped as well. I mean, the funding and everything.
Well, our educational system is basically funded by the real estate taxes in the various communities. So for example, the very affluent communities, their school districts receiving more tax revenue from their community. Where in the urban areas where you have very low real estate value, they receive very low, revenue from that. So again, the school system is not adequately funded.
Sure. That's a really interesting perspective. You know what, I think it would be a good idea to get some perspective from our audience. Naveed Bhai, could you please, maybe coming from Chicago, you're a business major, I believe. Could you please give us some perspective on what it is to be learning in the urban life?
Well, I wouldn't go so much as university, because a lot of times a university is not in densely populated areas, but in densely populated areas before university, there are a lot of struggles in the urban environment. For example, the students get crowded into a class, and also these students come from a lot of times single-parent homes, because that's also a symptom of the urban community and the urban life. And when that happens, they also have a lot of struggles in terms of identity, and you'll see a lot of young males, they'll be, prone to violence or even prone to depression and a lot of different things that manifest themselves in a variety of different ways. And then these people are the ones that eventually drop out, and they find other ways to, go and prosper in that life, because they don't have teachers who care about them, because the teachers are not funded enough to care about them. Those teachers are usually from different areas who don't have that same perspective of those kids.
That's a very interesting point that Naveed Bhai brings up. Now, I think we've talked a little bit about sort of this overview of that, we have some struggles and we have these, educational struggles. What are some social problems that we have in these inner cities?
Okay.
What are some of these inner city problems? I'll direct that to Ahmed Nuruddin, please.
Socially, in the cities, the problems are probably very much like the problems anywhere else in the country. Because again, with the information that's being spread so quickly through the internet, through the television, and other media outlets, we're all exposed to the same type of information, and socially we get influenced much the same way. So it's not much different what happens in the inner cities than may happen other places in the country. Now, the lack of education and the lack of funds and adequate employment and such, it affects the people socially, because a lot of people I come in contact with in Philadelphia, they want to live that good life. They want to have that nice house and that nice car and all like that, but they don't have the, say, the background that's going to help foster a lifestyle like that. So they go into, a lot of times, illegal means or other criminal type of activities to try to acquire that lifestyle, which they have been shut out of because of deficiencies in other parts of the community.
I'm going to turn to the audience here and try to get some perspective on trying to attain sort of a better lifestyle and some of these key issues here. Has anybody actually from the audience incorporated themselves maybe socially or wanted to touch on this topic? I think Austin wanted to mention something, if we can get the microphone.
Assalamu alaikum. I was going to say, I'd like to hear some perspectives from the panel on how being in an inner city life, but being associated with the Jamaat, and having how that may have benefited you and helped you in your personal life, and how you feel like that could help other youth in your area, having the influence of Jamaat, how they could leverage that, maybe how you may have leveraged that to avoid certain influences that you may have succumbed to had that not been there.
So I suppose the question is essentially, how do we build these relationships in these inner cities, and how Islam, I believe, has played a vital role in doing so?
What was it that particularly helped you from the Jamaat? Was it, going to the mosque? Was it praying? Was it reading the Holy Quran? What was it particularly that helped you to avoid those vulnerabilities that other youth are, exposed to?
And I think another segment of that is actually to add to that is, what was it about Islam that attracted you so much? Because I don't think everybody initially was, a part of Islam fully at one point, and I think that's an extremely important point, is that what is it about Islam that is, inspired you so much to go out there? Maybe.
I know in Philadelphia, excuse me, I know in Philadelphia, and I'm sure it's like this in a lot of urban settings around the country, that everything seems to be based on the pleasure principle. Let's have fun, let's entertain ourselves, let's go out and mix and mingle, and this is what people want to do aside from their occupations and such. Being a member of the Ahmadiyya Jamaat, it gives us a social outlet to come and be with people and socialize on a good level, on a spiritual level, as opposed to the level which other groups are socializing, which is again based on having fun and playing around and not having anything progressive about it, but just in the moment. Whereas we as Ahmadis, we always are looking forward to the hereafter, we're looking forward to the future for ourselves and our families, to imbibe the teachings of the Quran and to move forward in that way. And so being a member of the Jamaat, it provides having a social outlet. We can come together and have fun and athletics and all of that too, but it's for a higher goal and a higher purpose.
So let me quickly, okay, go ahead, Rumbai, actually.
So I think remembering Allah, when you establish a strong relationship with God and know that it is a true living God that's there, that's watching, and that is one of the highest virtues, to remember Allah in everything you do, and maybe you think twice about getting involved in certain things within your surroundings, your environment, and also try to follow the examples of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, and that'll give you a lot of respect, because those are universal examples, universal principles that respects a lot of mankind, and a lot of people will respect you for that. These are no examples that's telling you to do anything terrible, bad, it's just examples that show you how to have respect for humanity, because everybody are human beings before anything, before your religion, before your ethnic background, anything. So that's some of the main issues I would like to touch on.
And that's an interesting point that you mentioned repeatedly. I think was respect amongst the your peers is extremely crucial, and sort of building that respect in itself through your religion is a very valuable aspect to have. Can I
add something to that too?
Sure.
Because prayer and fasting also becomes like a shield for you from the negative influences of the society. For instance, when you have to wake up for prayer, Fajr prayer in the morning, you're not going to be staying up all night long on the internet or playing around. You want to get your rest in so you can be fresh to make your prayer. Fasting during the month of Ramadan and at other times, you don't want to engage yourself, and you build up that spiritual muscle within yourself through fasting to resist some of the temptations. Giving your chanda, you don't waste your money frivolously on things, because you have to pay your chanda. You're not going to go out and spend it on the latest trendy little thing, and know that you have to pay your chanda at the end of the week or end of the month. So in these various ways, it helped me personally to kind of stay away from those influences of the society.
That's a great point. I think I want to turn it to the audience here very quickly, just to see what are some of these aspects that Ahmed Nuruddin Bhai and the rest of the panelists are talking about, in the sense of, prayer and steadfastness, I believe, has helped you become better as a person, and your overall lifestyle. Considering this fast-paced, environment that we're in, a lot of us are students or we're working in these mixed environments. We have to be on our guard all the time. Can anybody sort of touch on that briefly, please, Ishmael?
I don't know, like being a Muslim and an Ahmadi, it's made a lot of situations easier for me, like right off the bat. Like people know in my high school that I'm Muslim, so a lot of things I don't even have to like deal with, whereas like girls and blah, 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 right, they just know. And a lot of things like drugs, alcohol, parties, people just, generally like that's not even like an issue for me.
So you've been able to adapt yourself in a sense that you can basically prevent yourself from going here or there and make yourself focused on your overall goal and
Exactly.
be steadfast.
Just by being a Muslim.
Would anybody else actually like to add to that? Yeah, please.
For me, it was more of an educational experience where when I entered this school, I was in the late 80s, people really didn't know much about Islam. And I found myself educating my peers, letting them know what Islam was, what our fundamentals were, and what we believe in and how certain things are forbidden. And I don't do them merely because I don't want to. I do them because Allah says not to do it, and I want to make Him happy.
I think that's an interesting point that you mentioned, is that, you know, expressing to the people who were not fully aware of what Islam was. And I think today, you know, in the media, Islam is portrayed completely differently. And so we have an even bigger objective to have, you know, sort of clarify to the general public what it is. Maybe one more comment if anybody'd like to, please. Ahmed, bye.
I think one of the things that helps a lot, these days we hear a lot about support groups. In an urban area where it's densely populated, if you find, you know, a clique or a group of people, you know, that can have positive reinforcements for you and for the rest of the group, you know, it goes a long way in, you know, keeping yourself focused and keeping you, you know, away from any distractions.
It's a very good point. I think this conversation is actually coming to a really, really good point of, you know, your self-perspectives and things like that. What we're going to do is we're going to take a short break here for part 2. Please stay tuned for part 2.